Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm the Dog Velazi, and coming up in today's newscast. As Russia makes use of Iranian drones in its invasion of Ukraine, Kyiv seeks arms and defense systems from Israel. Will Jerusalem comply? Less than 2 weeks until the Israeli elections, will Itamar Ben Gvir be this election's kingmaker? And after Fauda and Shtisel, what new Israeli TV shows are debuting this fall? Despite the use of Iranian drones and reportedly increased Iranian involvement in Russia's war against Ukraine, Israel still remaining steadfast in its decision not to give in to Kyiv's request to provide arms or defenses to Ukraine. The details in the following report. Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz reiterated on Tuesday evening that Israel has not and does not intend to sell arms or air defense systems to Ukraine. His comments came shortly after the Ukrainian foreign minister announced in a press conference that Kyiv intends to submit an official request to Israel seeking immediate air defense supplies in the wake of Iranian involvement in the war. Ukraine has accused Russia of using Iranian kamikaze drones in its latest strikes against electrical infrastructure and other civilian targets in recent days.
Сьогодні Україна надійшла офіційну ноту уряду Ізраїлю з проханням невідкладно надати Україні системи протиповітряної оборони та започаткувати якісне співробітництво щодо отримання Україною відповідних технологій. Іран, ви знаєте, що Іран – це червона лінія для Ізраїлю. І після того, як Іран напряму, по суті, став співучасником злочину агресії проти України, я думаю, будь-хто в Ізраїлі, хто ще має якісь вагання щодо того, допомагати Україні чи не допомагати, він повинен ці вагання, по ідеї, повинні розвіятися. І ми будемо працювати над цим з нашими ізраїльськими партнерами.
Recent reports have indicated that Iran has not only provided Russia with drones, but has also sent military trainers to Russian-occupied Ukraine to help Moscow overcome problems with the fleet of drones it acquired. According to a report in the New York Times on Tuesday, the Iranian trainers are from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, designated a terrorist organization by the United States, and are operating from a Russian military base in Crimea. While Israel has condemned the Russian invasion of Ukraine and provided humanitarian relief, it has to date refused to provide military support for fear of losing its continued cooperation with Russia over Israeli operations against Iran in Syria. In fact, Gantz's remarks also came on the heels of a warning from former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, who said that should Israel supply arms to Ukraine, it would risk relations with Moscow. Meanwhile, opposition leader Benjamin Netanyahu on Tuesday, in an interview on MSNBC, expressed rare support for the government's stance on the Ukraine war and said that often weapons Israel supplies to other countries end up in Iranian hands used against Israelis.
I think the larger question of Ukraine is something else, and I'll add my 2 cents worth here. I think the greatest danger of Ukraine is not merely the tragedy that is unfolding there, the indiscriminate bombing of civilians and so on. I think the greatest danger is that this conflict would unravel to a global conflict with ominous proportions and the possible use of nuclear weapons. I don't think it makes that much difference if it's tactical nuclear weapons or strategic nuclear weapons. That threshold has not been crossed for 77 years. And I think what is required right now is a combination of firmness and prudence to make sure that this conflict ends and certainly doesn't spread.
And joining us now with more on the Iranian involvement in the Russia-Ukraine war is Commander in the Reserves Dr. Ayal Pinko, an expert in military strategy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
So first of all, what is the significance of Iran's involvement in Ukraine?
There are many aspects for the Iranian involvement. First, from the Russian perspective. From the Russian perspective, they need this aid, this help with technologies, with more ammunition. They are short with ammunition. And military assistance giving, and by the way, as well as air defense system. So this military aid is very, very important to Russia, especially when they started 2 weeks ago the new phase of the war with the new general that was appointed to run the war in Ukraine. So this is from the Russian point of view. From Ukrainian point of view, Iran was a very good friend of Ukraine, and now it's some kind of betrayal story that runs between Iran and Ukraine decided to disconnect the political and diplomatic ties with Iran, which is very important, speaking about economy and energy point of view.
So why would Iran get involved in this conflict in the first place? I mean, what is in it for the Islamic Republic?
It's a very good question. Iran sees in Russia as a very important and strategic partner. From one side, Russia is controlling, mainly is the superpower that controlling the Middle East and what is happening in Syria, Lebanon, in Iraq. So as an influencer in this region for Iran that sees its involvement in the Mediterranean arena, Russia is a very important partner. The other part, which is much more important for Iran, that is Russia is absolutely in favor of the Iranian nuclear program. And since the war in Ukraine, Russia halted the negotiation with Iran on the nuclear program, saying that if Russia will not be part of this agreement, there will no agreement between Iran and the superpowers. So Iran understands that Russia has a lot of influence on the process going to nuclear program. It's a very important phase of that. And of course, technologies to increase the capabilities in the nuclear program as well is a very important part of that.
And what about for Israel? I mean, where does Israel stand in all this? If Iran is getting involved in Ukraine and forming, a closer alliance with Russia, what does this mean for Israel in terms of its operations in Syria against Iran, and also in terms of whether Israel should, in turn, supply weapons to Ukraine?
Yeah, Russia is a major player in the Middle East, and for Israel, Russia is an important key player here because everything that is involved in the Iranian presence in Syria, the Syrian activities, the Hezbollah activities from Lebanon, Russia has major influence on that. And the coordination that we faced in the last years with Russia of all the IDF operations in Syria and Lebanon, it was a very important part. And according, of course, to open media, every attack that Israel did in Syria was coordinated a few hours before with Russia in order not to hit Russian soldiers, platforms, and bases. And now, with the Iranian involvement in Russia, we will need to be much more cautious in what we do in Syria and Lebanon. And I think in some way it will narrow the IDF steps and the operational missions that the IDF is executing in those countries.
And what about supplying weapons to Ukraine? Should Israel do that now that Iran is involved?
Yeah, I was asked many times about this question. I think that looking in Ukraine, Ukraine is not really some kind of strategic partner that Israel needs. And it's much better not to get involved with Russia and not to that the Russian bear will not be angry on us than to help Ukraine. There is a crisis in Ukraine, a humanitarian crisis. I think that the Jewish conscience cannot cannot look forward and not to avoid what is happening in Ukraine. So I think it's important to help Ukraine with medical supplies, hospitals, medicines, everything that they need. But it's better not to get involved in this war on campaign, saying that let's help Ukraine with weapons. This will be a totally game changer between us and Russia, and we should avoid it at any cost.
Israel walking a fine line. Dr. Ayal Pinko, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
To watch full episodes of ILTV's Israel Daily and tons of other content from Israel, visit our website at iltv.tv or download the ILTV Plus app.